Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Mom. President Trump hosting Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney at the White House for the second time in 5 months. A look at what issues they're discussing. It's day 7 of the government shutdown. Staffing shortages at airports are causing delays, and President Trump says he's talking to Democrats about health care. We have the latest. Attorney General Pam Bondi clashes with senators on the deployment of the National Guard to Chicago, Epstein files, and past conducts by the Biden administration. We tune in to her oversight hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee. On the second anniversary of the October 7th attacks, mediators are working to implement President Trump's peace plan for the Gaza Strip. The status of the negotiations and how likely it is to fighting will end. British police cracked down on an international criminal gang suspected of smuggling 40,000 stolen mobile phones to China over the past 12 months. They say this gang could be behind 40% of all phone thefts in London.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. President Trump is meeting with the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, at the White House to discuss trade and the Middle East. Trump says a trade deal with Canada is more complicated than with other countries because of how close the two nations are.
It's a complicated agreement, more complicated maybe than any other agreement we have on trade because, we have natural conflict. We also have mutual love. We have great love for each other. I love Canada and the people of Canada, and Mark feels the same way about here. The problem we have is that they want a car company and I want a car company, meaning the U.S. wants a car company, and they want steel and we want steel. And, so in other countries, they're very far away, and there's no problem. You can compete and you can do. We don't like to compete because we sort of hurt each other when we compete, and so we have a natural conflict. It's a natural business conflict. Nothing wrong with it, and I think we've come a long way over the last few months, actually, in terms of that relationship.
The president said they will negotiate a trade deal that will be good for both countries. Trump hopes to bring down Canadian tariffs on U.S. agriculture products, and will also talk about U.S. tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel. Trump said he wants to figure out how the U.S. and Canada can compete in areas where they have to compete and work closely in areas where they can. For example, Trump said both the U.S. and Canada will be working closely on the Golden Dome anti-missile defense system that will cover the two nations. On the government shutdown, the president warned that he will be making permanent cuts very soon.
We have a lot, I'm not going to tell you, but we'll be announcing it pretty soon. But we have a lot of things that we're going to eliminate and permanently eliminate. One of the things that we have is some advantage, you could say. But because of the shutdown, which I think they made a big mistake, we're able to take out billions and billions of dollars of waste, fraud, and abuse. I can tell you, I'll be able to tell you that in 4 or 5 days if this keeps going on. If this keeps going on, it'll be substantial. And a lot of those jobs will never come back. But you're going to have a lot closer to a balanced budget, actually.
The president also discussed the situation in Gaza on the second anniversary of the October 7th Hamas terrorist attack. He said the U.S. is in very serious negotiations and is very close to a deal. Trump said he hopes the deal would bring long-lasting peace to the Middle East. He emphasized that once the deal happens, the U.S. will do everything possible to make sure everyone adheres to it. And Attorney General Pam Bondi appeared on Capitol Hill today to take questions from senators. Judiciary Chair Chuck Grassley focused on new evidence of what he called political weaponization under the Biden administration. Here's Grassley.
Was Attorney General, on the same subject, was Attorney General Garland, Director Wray, and or President Biden's White House aware of the FBI targeting Republican senators? Did they approve it? Now let's be clear, either they knew and allowed it to happen or they didn't know, and if they didn't know, it points to a lack of oversight of Jack Smith's runaway case.
Chairman Grassley, that's what we've been talking about when we refer to the weaponization of government. Operation Arctic Frost was an unconstitutional, undemocratic abuse of power. During Arctic Frost, the FBI also placed 92 linked Republican individuals and Republican groups, such as Charlie Kirk's Turning Point, on their list. This is the kind of conduct that shattered the American people's faith in our government, as I said in my opening statement. We are ending this weaponization. Our FBI is targeting violent criminals, child predators, and other lawbreakers, not sitting senators who happen to be from the wrong political party. Several of your colleagues sitting at this dais were targeted, and others. We will continue to stop that throughout the Justice Department. That is the ultimate weaponization of government.
Bondi stressed in the opening statement that the Justice Department has two main goals under her leadership: to end the weaponization of government and fight violent crime. She said the department has made tremendous progress towards those ends. The Attorney General clashed with Democratic senators over the Epstein files and the deployment of the National Guard to Chicago. Here's Senator Dick Durbin.
Why do you want to keep this secret? The American people don't know the rationale behind the deployment of National Guard troops in my state. The word is, and I think it's been confirmed by the White House, they are going to transfer Texas National Guard units to the state of Illinois. What's the rationale for that?
Yeah, Chairman, as you shut down the government, you voted to shut down the government, and you're sitting here, our law enforcement officers aren't being paid. They're out there working to protect you. I wish you loved Chicago as much as you hate President Trump. And currently, the National Guard are on the way to Chicago. If you're not going to protect your citizens, President Trump will.
I've been on this committee for more than 20 years. That's the kind of testimony you expect from this administration. A simple question as to whether or not they had a legal rationale for deploying National Guard troops becomes grounds for a personal attack. I think it's a legitimate question.
Bondi referred to Chicago's high crime rate and sanctuary policies, saying the city is sheltering illegal immigrant criminals and gangs. She said the Trump administration is going into cities like Chicago to make these places safe, whether they want it or not. President Trump met with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney today, and joining us now to discuss is Mike Leon, NTD News contributor and host of the Can We Please Talk podcast. And we have Tony Kinnett, national correspondent at the Daily Signal and host of the Tony Kinnett Cast radio show and podcast. So good to see you guys, as always. Tony, I'll start with you today. And you heard in the soundbite earlier that President Trump was talking about how the Canadian-U.S. relationship is complicated. Can we get your comments on that? Is it complicated? Why is it?
Well, I believe that it's definitely complicated in a business sense, given that Trump wants to kind of reset the balance of power economically here among the North American countries. But it's also a little bit awkward because, yeah, we were just in kind of a grumpy argument, kind of a tussle with Canada over certain things. And so, yeah, things are going to be a little bit awkward as you're in the middle of negotiating some normalized relations on the economic front. That's why there was those little awkward pauses, kind of after some minor chuckles when he would say, you know, we're going to get it right and get it back. And that's, you know, we were on the other side of that a couple of months ago. So I do believe there is some economic tension. What he says, coming from a Rust Belt state myself, the economic tensions, especially in steel and manufacturing between the United States and Canada, yes, those are very real. They have caused Americans economic pain, but it's not something that you can just snap your fingers and fix because, as the president accurately said, they're just next door and they're a major economic trading partner in a lot of economic areas. So to just snap your fingers and say, presto, it's fixed is not necessarily how this is going to work. It's quite an undertaking.
Okay, Mike, what do you think? Is this relationship between the U.S. and Canada complicated?
First off, good to see you all. Tony, drop the impression. Leave that to the professionals here. Everyone knows it's so good over here. It's so good. But, you know, I heard recently the Minister of Transport, Lisa Raitt, she was a former Minister of Transport in Canada. She was on a podcast and she said something to the effect about tariffs and Canada and the U.S. And she said, it's like being on a flight with turbulence, right? You have to sit on the flight. You can't get off the plane. And you have to ride this out until it lands, right? And I think that analogy is really encompassing of what is going on right now. Look, Canada right now is at its highest unemployment rate in a minute, and 7.1%, I believe, is their unemployment rate right now. So Carney knows he's got his hands full. to what Tony was mentioning before, the two big industries that are highlighted here and the millions of dollars that pour across the border from both of those, they impact both countries. Like, let's be honest. I was speaking with a Canadian business owner, a small business owner from in the HVAC section, and he was telling me, kind of outlining for me the ways tariffs have impacted his business. There's a trickle back effect, right? Like, we see the laughing and everything that's going on today and the pomp and circumstance around two leaders meeting. But there's a trickle back effect that's being felt on both sides of the border. And to Tony's point, you can't just magically snap your fingers and put that all back into place. It is a turbulent flight right now. It's been upended after USMCA is set to expire. So now we have to figure out how this trade agreement will be, and all while knowing that this is our neighbor. Like, this is somebody that people live on this side of the border and then work in Canada and vice versa, especially on the New York side, for example. So there's a lot to it, and it's a little bit more complicated than we're leading on.
So Tony, you know, I don't remember previous presidents saying that this relationship between Canada and the U.S. is complicated. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but what do you think each side is trying to get out of this meeting right now?
Well, Bill Clinton did famously in 1998 make it clear that Canada had been treated far too kindly with American economic passes. Was one of the only comments economically that was ever pointed out by the president. Usually that's left to the Secretary of Commerce in the Obama administration, for example. But as far as the Canadian relationship with the United States, it's got different facets. Again, the United Kingdom is famous for this. We've had very different relations with, for example, the State Department of the United Kingdom, the Trade Ministry of the United Kingdom, and then, of course, the military alliance between the United States and the United Kingdom. Canada's the same way. They're our little brother. No one messes with them militarily. I don't so. But at the same time, we do need to iron out some of these economic, as much as I am loath to use the word imbalances, that do not, in fact, benefit all individuals on every side of, or on both sides of the border here. The issue that I think is at hand here is that once you start taking things apart, you find other things are broken. I replaced a well pump switch in my house this morning. It was a delightful experience. And I found something broken in the process of replacing it. That's a lot what this economic negotiation with Canada is proceeding through. The way that steel and aluminum tariffs and on both sides of the aisle, those kind of trigger mechanisms that set into place, those are very outdated and set for a very different kind of manufacturing environment when they were put into place. And so, again, Trump being kind of the bull in the China shop, he's breaking things in order to fix them. That's his style. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it, you know, that turbulence that Mike alluded to, that the former transportation minister of Canada had said, I think that's accurate here. And I think that we are coming out of that turbulence. It's just what the deal looks like on the other side in the new manufacturing economy that I'm still looking to see whether or not I like it or not.
So, Mike, do you think that turbulence has eased a bit since Carney came to power? How would you describe the tone of the meeting today?
Well, I mean, you got to take out some of the dumb things. I'm not going to do, maybe I'll do the impression right now, you know, with a hot country right now. It was so hot. A lot of people say we're so hot. I mean, you can't quantify how hot we are, right? But I do think that Carney coming here, I think this is his third time that they've met. The second time coming here to the U.S., if I'm not mistaken, they met at one of the NATO summits as well. That wasn't here in the U.S. But I think it's symbolic of Carney coming here and saying, like, we're at an impasse because Canada is starting to feel it. And I mentioned this before about the former transport minister, but like I've been listening to, Don, a lot of Canadian podcasts to kind of find out more about what's going on up there. And they know that who holds the cards in the relationship. Like, let's be honest. Like I just mentioned, 3.6 billion Canadian dollars that flow into Canada from the business that we do with them. So, and the fact that the unemployment rate is starting to go a little bit higher now, Carney knows that he has to come a little bit hand in hand, but also with an understanding, like to Tony's point, that there can't be a quick Band-Aid to this. The USMCA lasted 5 years. NAFTA was what, 9 years, 10 years? My math sucks right now. Maybe a little bit longer, so you can correct me on that. I think it was a little bit longer. But there has to be something that's set framework-wise that doesn't impact Canadian business owners and doesn't impact U.S. business owners. And to the bull in China shop analogy that Tony gave, it is true right now. Trump has, we've said this numerous times, he's used tariffs as leverage. He wants people to come over here, grovel. That way he can publicly show his base, hey, look, I'm telling them to build here in America, buy here in America, like we're going to do it here in America, or they're going to pay this exorbitant fee. And I think we're starting to see with Canada, there's actual real impact happening right now with respect to some businesses, some
Mhm.
automotive shops starting to close in Canada. Like they're starting to feel that impact. So he's using it to his advantage. It is a bull in a china shop thing because now the glass is broken. Now we've got to figure out how do we put this back together? Do we even want to put this back together, or do we even want to buy a new set altogether? In continuing with the analogy.
Okay, Tony, I want to ask you this as well. How do you think Trump's talk of making Canada the 51st state, how does that fit into the picture?
Well, for those of us who have kind of a long form view of history instead of reacting to every single word out of the president's mouth, it was very clear. And by the way, as someone who would have no problem with Alberta seceding from Canada and joining the Union, North Indiana, as it were, no, I don't think Canada as the 51st state was ever some extremely big, serious negotiation tactic. I think he said that to draw a clear line of frustration from Trudeau and then from Carney. It does benefit Trump to have Carney being the one that he negotiated with, given that Pierre Poilievre would have been a much more Canada first, willing to take it on the chin style negotiator. Whereas I think that Carney here is in a really difficult position and essentially does have to, as Mike accurately put it, kind of grovel a bit. And this is the real rub. This is the real issue with economic deals that is going to make people a little uncomfortable. There is no everyone wins game where we all dance around in a field of flowers. We're not to that point yet. I know Ezra Klein on the left and his abundance style of economics, kind of the classic Tea Party right, is also in favor of that type of abundance economics. We're not there yet to the point where the resources are flowing so freely that everyone's a winner. And so for the next 10 years, as you do repair the economic system that was hollowed out by the mass manufacturing being shipped out of the country and new economies taking its place, not even having sure footing yet, the education system being rather broken to prepare people for an economy that really no longer exists. Well, that means that if we just set up the US-Canadian relationship to be just the way it always has been, then it is going to unfairly benefit Canadians when Americans hold the cards. And I'm sorry that has to be said. I'm electing leaders to serve my best interests first. My father lost his job in the 2008 ship off of jobs, and Mexico benefited from NAFTA policy. You can say, well, but on principle, it's really wonderful. And maybe it is in theory, but this isn't in theory, it's in practice. There's a lot more factors to economics. There's a lot more factors to trade and manufacturing. This is something that I think Mike and I articulate really well when we come on these segments. There are a lot of nuances to these policies that aren't as easy as just slapping a campaign slogan or a Band-Aid on something and getting the kumbaya experience that every campaign, regardless of party, promises. And I think you're seeing that borne out in these negotiations. That's why they sound different every time. And that's why, even though maybe very extravagant statements like, ooh, the 51st state being Canada are proposed, long-term people who pay attention to these things and keep an eye on them, they weren't really mussed or fussed. They were just like, he's posturing. And lo and behold, he was posturing.
Okay, so Mike, Trump is doing what he set out to do in his campaign promises, right? Make America first.
He is. I mean, again, I look, there are a lot of other pundits that will go on TV and they won't give the president credit for anything. I would love to happily join them in certain instances, but then there are certain times where if, like, for example, Israel and Gaza, this 20-point plan, I've mentioned this a bunch of times, but I know we may wander here, but if he solves a conflict in the Middle East that is thousands of years old and a land dispute for all intent and purpose, I mean, you have to give the person credit for that, especially when other people in the region are giving him credit for that. So to answer your broader question, and one thing Tony said there that I want to piggyback on, Don, that's very important in all this is he's right about Carney winning the prime minister seat, because I think the poke was always at Trudeau. And that's why Trudeau went to, if you remember, when Trump won, he went to Mar-a-Lago. I think he was the first world leader to go to Mar-a-Lago right afterwards. He was always poking at Trudeau. But Carney stepping in, who, again, has an economics background. I mean, there's nobody better to lead. If you're going to want to navigate the turbulence of these economic flights, for the analogy.
Bring in the banker.
You want Mark Carney. Yeah, you want Mark Carney being, either pilot or co-pilot in this. And I think Canada has somebody in there that understands that. And I also think that Trump knows Carney's background. And I'm not sure if they've ever had any business dealings together, but they know each other and they know their background. They know what they bring. And Tony and I, he said it again, I'll echo it. It's about explaining how these policies affect every day, whether it be Americans and in this case, Canadians. And Tony giving that example of jobs being shipped off. wherever the policy nets out, somebody will lose from this, right? There's always sometimes a winner, sometimes a loser. And so there'll always be that with respect to this negotiation, which is why we need to understand that. And I think you saw a different tone, I thought, outside of the joking, outside of the America's a hot country or whatever. I think you saw a different tone when the two of them were talking about the relationship. And I thought Trump actually summarized it pretty well about, like, we have natural, interests that conflict, but, we love each other. I love Canada. So
Accurate.
I thought it was a different tone this time for sure.
Okay, so Tony, I understand your position that the president should prioritize Americans, America first policy, right? But you need to balance that with your having your allies, right? So what is the appropriate approach where you don't isolate yourself?
The fun dance between the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of the Treasury, and then your Secretary of State, because we don't want to push Canada into communist China's arms. We don't want to push any country into communist China's arms. They are the worst, underlined, bolded, italicized, and I don't want to see China allow itself any more room to grow as some kind of a pseudo moldy global hegemon amid its failing economy and culture. And then I see the Trump administration here, I do believe, kind of playing kind of the pre-World War I America revitalization with the United Kingdom, which is that, yeah, we have our disagreements, but there are bigger lions prowling around on the world stage that it's within our interest to take care of. And Trump, it's not the first time he said that. I know that he said that in the NATO meeting that Mike, of course, alluded to a little bit earlier. And he said that even amid the economic strife. He said, look, nobody's going to touch Canada. And the Golden Dome manufacturing idea, or at least the increasing of the United States Aegis missile defense systems and the THAAD missile defense systems, et cetera, drone countermeasures. Yes, Canada definitely needs to benefit from that as well. And so in this kind of new global ally structure, we do need to determine how we create an economic imbalance that is as minimal in its imbalance as possible to benefit Canada, because we do want Canada to grow, because then when they grow, they can buy more US stuff, the industry increases, and you do see a larger net amount of happiness and a smaller net amount of people who do lose long-term. That's the abundance policy to work to. But at the same time, yeah, if we're talking about allies or countries that will get less while the US gets more, I would prefer to see Canada be as close to the United States in that net balance of fairness as possible, because, yeah, Beijing should not benefit off of a failed economic alliance, maybe would be the way to say it, between the US and Canada.
Well, all right. I think we can leave the conversation here for this week. It's always fun to talk to you guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
And now Senate Majority Leader John Thune is speaking on Capitol Hill about the government shutdown. Let's take a look.
Good afternoon, everyone. Every day that the Democrats keep the government shut down is creating more and worse consequences for the American people. The White House estimates that it's costing our economy about $15 billion a week to continue to have the government shut down, but it's not just our economy. It's American families, the American people who are paying the price. The program funding for the WIC program, Women's, Infants, and Children program, was about set to expire. I think the White House is trying to figure out a way to move resources around to be able to keep that program up and funded. Telehealth, hospital at home, programs like that have expired, meaning that hospitals are losing and patients are losing their flexibility and making it harder to cover the people who need to be covered. And then, of course, the this week paychecks start being affected for federal workers, and that is going to have real consequences for them and their families as well. So this shutdown continues to create more and more problems, and the Democrats are going to get another chance. They've already voted 5 different times now to keep the government shut down and against opening up the government, which we have from our colleagues in the House, a clean funding resolution, which is nonpartisan, something that 13 previous occasions, the Democrats' majority here in the Senate and the Biden presidency, almost all Democrats voted for, all 13 times. This is a fairly routine thing that happens down here, happens around here on a regular basis. So instead, what they've tried to do is hijack this to get $1.5 trillion in new spending. And that's just, there's no universe in which that's going anywhere around here. This is a very simple and straightforward proposition. The Democrats want to have a conversation about the COVID tax credit cliff that they created. And at some point, we're happy to have that conversation, but not until the government opens up. Again, the consequences for the American people are very real, and this just has to stop. And it could stop today. We have the bill in front of us. It's in the Senate. House has passed it and supported it. President is ready to sign it into law. Could do it today. All we have to do is pick it up off the desk, as you all know. And if there are a handful of Democrats, a few more Democrats who are willing to vote with us, we can get this government opened up again and limit the impact and the effect that it has, the consequences, the adverse consequences on the American people. I'm glad to welcome our colleague, the leader of the House of Representatives, my partner, Speaker Mike Johnson.
Thank you, Leader Thune. I appreciate you inviting me to the Senate lunch today. That happened within the last hour, and I visited with my colleagues over here on this side and affirmed to them that we are all 100% united. And it's a good position to be in. When the facts and the truth are on your side, it's easy to present and defend that to the public. The President is united with us as well. He knows that we are doing the right thing for the right reasons at the right time. The House passed the continuing resolution. It was clean, and you all know we've been saying this every day now entering, I guess, the end of the first week of the Democrat shutdown. There's no reason for them to have done that. The CR was completely clean. It was 24 pages in length, and it is the bare minimum to keep the lights on so that government can continue to work for the people. Real pain is being felt by real people around this country because Chuck Schumer and the Democrats over here are playing political games. We all know the reasons why. They have selfish motivations because they're trying to cover themselves for their left flank. In my press conference this morning on the other side, in the other chamber, I mentioned that Chuck Schumer has been in Washington for 44 years. He began his congressional career when I was in 3rd grade. I was 9 years old when he came to this building. And ever since he came here, throughout his career, he has been a fierce advocate for never closing down the government. I mean, he gave impassioned speeches most recently as 7 months ago in March of this year when he stood before the cameras and he gave an impassioned speech on the Senate floor saying that it would be dangerous and destructive and terrible to close down the government, that he had to do the right thing. Right after he took that vote, he went on to the national media. He did a big interview on CNN, I think with Jake Tapper, and he said, I'm proud of my vote. I know I did the right thing. What changed? What changed? Nothing's changed except his political calculation. He's afraid that a Marxist is going to challenge him in his re-election because Marxism is in vogue in New York City, apparently, and he represents the state of New York. They're going to elect a Marxist for mayor. It's a shocking development, and I think it's shocking to Chuck Schumer as well. Nothing he factored in when he came here in 1981, but that is the political winds now. And so he's playing games, the American people's livelihoods and their actual lives. This is not a game. Leader Thune just mentioned, this gets very real. Checks to our troops will be held up October 15th if they don't come in here tomorrow and vote to reopen the government. You have to get it resolved by October 13th, which is Monday, in order to process those checks. I come from a big military district. I have Barksdale Air Force Base. The Home Global Strike Command is there. I have Fort Polk, the Joint Readiness Training Center. We have young airmen and soldiers deployed around the world right now defending our freedom. And they left their young families at home. They're dependent upon that check on October 15th. And some of them, sadly, also rely upon WIC funding, Women, Infants, and Children Nutrition Programs. That's suspended as well. Why? Because Chuck Schumer wants to play political games. I do not understand it. I hope every journalist here listening today will go and demand him to do the right thing. Ask him the question, why are you doing it? He has no justification. They have created a distraction. They're trying to pretend this is about a end-of-the-year policy decision on health care, and it is not. It's a clean, simple CR. Let's keep the government open so that we can do this work and continue those debates. Again, thank you, Leader Thune, for your leadership, and I'm sure you'll take a few questions.
Yeah. Questions? What's that?
Lawyers, the top lawyer at the OMB on the 2019 statute on back pay. He says it's not guaranteed for federal workers that are impacted here. And President Trump followed that up saying that it wasn't certain that all employees would get back pay. Have you taken a look at that memo, and what is your interpretation?
I haven't looked at the memo specifically yet. My assumption is that furloughed workers will get back pay. But that being said, this is very simple. Open up the government, and this is a non-issue. We don't have to have this conversation. Everybody gets paid when the government is open. The Democrats can do it by delivering a handful of votes this afternoon. We could go in there and we could open up this government. The president's ready to sign it into law, as the speaker pointed out. If that doesn't happen, there are a lot of really bad things that happen to the American people. And there are going to be a lot of people who aren't going to be getting paychecks. And you know, he mentioned our troops. That is something that becomes a reality starting next week.
Speaker Johnson, your strategy over the weekend was to convince these 5 Democrats to suddenly vote. That strategy appears to have failed. You voted Friday. You had failed votes last night. Why weren't you able to convince them to change their position?
I think there are a lot of Democrats who are being bludgeoned by their political left, and because they desperately want to pick a fight with this president. This is something, as we said earlier, that 13 different occasions Democrats in the Senate voted for when they had the majority and President Biden was in the White House. And you have to ask yourself the question, what's changed? What's changed is the President of the United States is now President Trump. And so this is all about politics. But I think they're under enormous pressure from their political left. I think they're under enormous pressure from their leadership. But there are going to have to be some brave souls who are courageous enough to come out and deliver the votes to open up the government. When they do that, all these questions and these bad consequences and things that are being talked about here go away.
Speaker Johnson, there was a moment earlier this year, you swore in 2 Republican members during a pro forma session. So why not swear in Adelita Grijalva, who was elected 2 weeks ago during a pro forma session? Does it have to do with her 218th signature on the discharge petition, the Epstein discharge?
No, it has nothing to do with that at all. We will swear her in when everybody gets back. It's a ceremonial duty. Look, we'll schedule it, I guess, as soon as she wants. It has nothing to do with it. We're in pro forma session because there is nothing for the House to do. The House has done its job. People say, why don't you do more? Let's do more. Now you should do something. We already did something. It was passing a clean CR. We did it over 2 weeks ago, almost 3 weeks ago now, and we sent it over here. This should have been a simple traditional thing that's been done. This is customary. There's nothing new under the sun. And in fact, it's exactly the same thing that Chuck Schumer voted for in March. So the House will get back to our normal order and doing our job as soon as he votes to reopen the government, because real people's lives are hanging in the balance right now. This is not a joke. It is beyond me that they're going to continue to dig their heels in and resist this. And I think the American people increasingly are going to let them know that. I was looking at a morning consult poll this morning. The needle is moving. More and more Americans are looking at the facts, and they're determining that it is indeed the Democrats who are responsible for this. Republicans are voting over and over and over to open the government. The president is pleading with them, open the government. And Chuck Schumer and 43 of his colleagues here in the Senate, the Democrats refuse to do it. I think it's shameful, and I think they're going to have a lot to answer for. And I don't know how much longer they'll be able to withstand this pressure, but we'll keep doing our job.
Speaker Johnson, a question, please. I know you said the House has done its job. However, military members are going to be missing a paycheck on October 15th. Critical air traffic controllers are already missing from the job in some areas.
Yeah.
Would you be open to pay for members of the military and air traffic controllers as an emergency measure in the next week or so, or 2 weeks?
Yeah, we're monitoring it day by day. I'm certainly open to that. We've done it in the past. We want to make sure that our troops are paid. I have colleagues like Congresswoman Jen Kiggans of Virginia, who has a big military district. She's already filed legislation to pay our troops. We're looking forward to processing all this as soon as we gather everybody back up. But again, the most immediate thing is turn the lights back on here and keep Congress working so we can take care of all this important business.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, you don't need that. You don't need to. Obviously, there are certain constituencies, many of whom are going to be impacted in a very negative way by what's happening here. But the simplest way to end it is not try to exempt this group or that group or that group. It's to get the government open, and then all the consequences, adverse consequences of this, go by the wayside. One more.
As you mentioned, it is a law that federal workers who are furloughed get back pay. What is the president talking about then when he's suggesting that some groups may not get paid? Is that even allowed?
I don't know the answer to your questions. I haven't seen their legal analysis, but again, my assumption is that furloughed workers will get back pay. But the broader question here is the answer to everything right now is open up the government. then these issues they're non-issues. And, you know, if you're sitting down there and the government's been shuttered and you're having to make decisions about, you know, where to prioritize funding, which department, which agency, which set of employees gets furloughed, which don't, which are essential, which aren't. Those are decisions that you have to make when you've got a government that's been shut down. And this government has been shut down by Chuck Schumer and the Senate Democrats. And it can open up today. And then every one of those questions becomes an irrelevant question because we'll have a functioning government and everybody will get paid as they should. Thank you.
Are you planning to keep the House out for the rest of the shutdown?
And that was Senate Majority Leader John Thune and House Speaker Mike Johnson talking to the press, saying that it is Democrats who is keeping the government shut down, saying that the Democrats have voted for this continuing resolution 13 times when they had the House and Senate when President Biden was in office. And there's nothing different other than now it is President Trump who is in the Oval Office. All right, taking a break now. There has been a rise of anti-Semitic attacks since the October 7th attack by Hamas. Why do events in the Middle East translate to anti-Jewish sentiments in Western society? Stay tuned for that when we come back.
Being a cowboy, I don't know anything different from when I was 3 or 4 years old. I did tough things. I thought everybody needed to do tough things, and if you didn't, I didn't have time for it. I had a very successful career at a very young age, and life was fast. I was preparing physically. I wasn't doing anything mentally on the inside. And then I got hurt. I wanted to be better as a person, and I really dug into mental health. I start my day with 20-minute workouts. I live life 8 seconds at a time. Horses are so therapeutic. They know what you're feeling. When you're nervous, they're nervous. He won't say it back, but we're pals. I take a lot of responsibility in taking care of my kids, my family, and being there for them. You're gonna have tough days. Everybody does. Find a place to stop and just breathe. Love your mind.
There is a road laid out for me.
Boxes everywhere. And this is gonna be Addie's room.
I am blind,
you're really gonna like it.
I hope so. Yeah. I know this road is there for me. There is a long way.
First night here, but Amy seems cool.
Ways down by the river. I am blind, but I need not see.
I got this.
I know this road is there for me.
Okay.
If I'm really free, take me down to the river and wash me.
My mom and dad were traditional Asian parents.
Now my father would go to work before I woke up in the morning, and then he would come home too tired to play with me. I tell my son, I love you every single day. Now my dad has never said that to me. Not because he doesn't love me, but because culturally it wasn't comfortable for him. So I teased him the other day and I said, how come you never say that to me? And he said, you're too old now. Now that he's a grandfather, he says, I love you to my son every time he sees him. My advice to all the fathers out there, forget the material things, forget the cultural restrictions. They grow up way too fast for you to waste even a single precious minute or moment.
Say bye-bye, baby.
Now, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is now speaking after Senate Majority Leader John Thune spoke. Let's take a listen to what he has to say.
Not to make the message about health care benefits because ours lose that argument. Then yesterday, Speaker Johnson couldn't even look directly into the camera saying his party is the party working to fix health care. A week or two ago, he didn't want to talk about it. Now he finds he has to talk about it, forced by the American people because they care so much about the issue. That's right, he said Republicans, the party that ripped health care away from millions of Americans to pay for tax cuts for the rich, the party that right now is refusing to actually address the health care crisis they created, refusing to extend the ACA tax credits, are now forced to talk about the very thing they were afraid to talk about, health care costs. And why? They know they're wrong. They know they're on the wrong side of the American people. Our position, Democrats' position, has been totally consistent. It hasn't changed. We want what an overwhelming majority of Americans want: to end this shutdown and address the health care crisis that will send premiums soaring for millions. 80% of Americans want to extend the ACA tax cuts. Amazing. Even more amazing, 58% of Trump voters want to extend the ACA tax cuts. We can and must do both. It's not an either or. End the shutdown and protect Americans' health care. It's not a choice. Republicans don't have to make it one. After weeks of asking Trump and Republican leaders to negotiate, yesterday Trump told reporters he's already talking to Democrats. Well, that's not true. But Leader Jeffries and I are happy to make it true. Democrats remain ready to seriously negotiate with Republicans to address the health care crisis and get out of the Republican shutdown. But we need everyone at the table. Hakeem and I, President Trump, Leader Thune, and of course, Speaker Johnson. But however, Speaker Johnson has been a massive roadblock to getting anything done. His members aren't even here doing their jobs. They've been home for weeks. He's not serious and he doesn't give a damn. Instead of doing his job, he's spreading lies, typical Johnson MO, to distract from his total incompetence to get a deal. Let's be clear. Democrats are fighting to protect Americans' health insurance. We're not pushing to give health insurance to undocumented immigrants. That's a lie. It's been proven to be a lie over and over again, but he doesn't care. He just keeps restating the lie because he's so afraid of the truth. Republicans' big old ugly bill will kick millions of American citizens off health care and drive costs through the roof. They know they're on the wrong side of this. More than 80% of Americans agree with Democrats to extend the tax credits. And Johnson is in a pickle. Why doesn't he want to vote on this? Because there are probably half of his caucus that don't want to vote on anything for health care, but there's another 50 to 80 members of his caucus that see the handwriting on the wall and want to vote for extending the credits. So he'd rather not have a vote, and that's why he's had his partisan strategy of sending us a bill and going home, but it ain't working. It ain't working. It's past time for us to work together, okay? It's past time to get it done. And Johnson instead is deceiving, ducking, and denying the reality. It's past time, though, for him, Thune, Trump, to stop the political gains, work with Americans to protect health care, and end the Trump Republican shutdown. Senator Murray.
And that was Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer saying that Democrats are ready to negotiate with Republicans on health care and saying that it is Republicans who is keeping the government shut down. Meanwhile, mediators are working to implement President Trump's peace plan for Gaza Strip. Qatar's foreign ministry says many details still have to be worked out, but all parties involved want to stick with Trump's plan.
All parties have agreed to this plan, so there are no obstacles now in terms of agreeing to the 20 points contained in President Trump's plan. The obstacles now are in implementation.
The spokesperson added that Qatar is neither optimistic nor pessimistic about the outcome of the negotiations so far. A spokesperson for Hamas says the terrorist group is also committed to Trump's plan, so the fighting in Gaza can't stop. Germany's foreign minister confirmed that he sees willingness on all sides to implement the points outlined by the president. The German minister is among the officials in Egypt today working out the details of the possible ceasefire. Trump's plan is widely seen as the most promising yet for ending the Israel-Hamas war, which started exactly 2 years ago. There has been a rise of anti-Semitic attacks since the October 7th attack by Hamas. Joining us now to discuss is Trevor Loudon, an author, filmmaker, and public speaker. For more than 30 years, he has researched Marxist movements, as well as the influence of the Chinese Communist Party. So Trevor, it's always to have you on the show. So a new report shows that there were nearly 2,000 anti-Semitic incidents in the first half of 2024, with a spike following the October 7th Hamas attack. Why do you think this is happening? What is causing this to happen?
Well, it's been driven by several things, and obviously the events in the Middle East are a big part of this. Now, what is happening here is the Chinese, the Iranians, the Qataris, and the Russians want to bring down Israel. And so they are amping up their propaganda operations in the United States, in Western Europe, every bit of anti-Israeli propaganda they can possibly come up with, that Israel killed Charlie Kirk, that Israel is deliberately shooting people coming for food aid. All of these propaganda points are being amped up, and you'll find the sources of them are basically Qatari-backed websites, Russian-backed websites, Iranian-backed websites, etc. And they have targeted heavily, especially American conservatives, because the goal is to split America away from Israel so that Israel can be more effectively destroyed, more quickly destroyed. That's really the bottom line here.
Okay, so the report is also highlighting a surge in incidents on campuses and in schools as well. Why do you think that is?
Well, you're seeing this coming through TikTok. I had a report from a teenage friend in New Zealand the other day telling me about how her friends are all anti-Jewish now. They're all anti-Israel because they get this propaganda on TikTok and other social media things. We've also seen the big upsurge in campuses of, very militant radicalism in the last 2 years. Unite, which is an alliance of local communist groups, plus Islamist groups like Students for Justice in Palestine, the Palestine Youth Movement, etc. So there's a very strong propaganda campaign for the left, which is coming out through social media, through TikTok, etc., to make people hate Jews, hate Israel, etc. And there's another campaign coming mainly from Russia and Iran to get conservatives to also despise Jews and Israel by spreading malicious rumors, unbacked accusations, and downright lies. This is probably one of the biggest propaganda campaigns we've seen in the world, actually, aimed at Israel right now. And it's been done through social media, driven by foreign actors, particularly Russia, China, Iran, and Muslim Brotherhood type operations.
So, Trevor, you're saying these anti-Semitic incidents is a result of propaganda, whether it's from China or another country. Would it be correct to say that then these incidents are not actually organic, in the sense that if we didn't get propaganda from China, then these events in the Middle East would not translate into anti-Jewish sentiments in Western societies?
100%. This is a deliberate policy to stir up hatred against Israel, to divide Israel from its Western allies, to isolate Israel. Very, very similar to what was done to Ukraine, actually, but this is probably maybe even a bigger scale. But 100%, you can trace this stuff coming from Russian-backed websites. You can trace it coming from Iranian-backed websites. All these memes that are floating around, the famous meme that Israel had Charlie Kirk killed. Well, you can trace it all back to Russian websites, but it is amplified by mainstream American, by American conservatives and others, without much fact checking going on. But that is the origin of the stuff. It's no accident that October 7th is Putin's birthday right now today, and that Hamas called Vladimir Putin their best friend. This is no accident whatsoever.
Can you put this level of anti-Semitic incidents into perspective for us? How does it compare historically?
Well, it's really, we haven't seen this since World War II. This is happening in every Western country, but particularly Western Europe and the United States. There's a massive campaign harnessing, there's always been this undercurrent of anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish feeling in certain countries, and that's been amplified. But what is happening now, it has been pushed into American and Western conservative movements who've traditionally been pro-Israel. And you're finding it also seeping into the American evangelical movement, which has really been more pro-Israel than many American Jews have been. So, yeah, but this is at historic levels, but it must be understood in terms of an international propaganda campaign very easily traced back to Russia, Iran, China, and Muslim Brotherhood entities. It is not hard to find the source of this stuff.
Okay, Trevor, I've come across a word that, if you wouldn't mind explaining what it means for me. What is the Red-Green Alliance behind the Hamas terror attack?
Well, the Red-Green Alliance is the alliance of communism and Islam. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood, which we've all heard about, was the father of Hamas. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood was founded in the 1920s with the help of the Egyptian Communist Party. So this alliance between Islam and communism has gone right back to the beginning. During the Cold War, the Palestine Liberation Organization, Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, were openly pro-Marxist, Leninist, pro-Soviet, Soviet-backed organizations. And still today, we're finding Chinese and Russian backing for Hamas and Hezbollah and similar groups. Hezbollah works very closely with the communists of Venezuela, works closely with the Russians, works closely with the Iranians. This is the evil empire all over again. This is Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, Cuba, Nicaragua, all of Venezuela, all of these countries on the left-hand side of the axis. And their biggest targets are, of course, Israel, Ukraine, Taiwan, and the United States, which is why we have so much propaganda out there today, because these countries can't really win militarily. They can only win by dividing the West, by dividing NATO, by dividing America from Israel, by dividing, Canada from the United States, all of this kind of thing, Taiwan from America. This is why we're seeing, and back in the old Soviet days, they were experts at disinformation, but they had to plant stories in newspapers. Now they just put them on the internet. Now they can put something on the internet at 2 o'clock from St. Petersburg, and it's all over America by 5 o'clock that night. They have hundreds, if not thousands of people sitting in rooms, coming up with fake news stories, often using real, the logos of real newspapers, fake news stories, and pumping it out 24/7. And if you know what to look for, it's very easy to identify, but most Americans are not trained in this. Most Americans, most Westerners don't really dig deep into the sources. And so this is the war against the West now is much more to do with disinformation. The Russian-Chinese war is much more to do with disinformation right now, setting us up for the kinetic stage later. And Israel right now is in the crosshairs. Israel is the number one target. They need to split Israel from the West. Israel is a very valuable Western ally. If they can destroy Israel, they control the Middle East, they control the Suez Canal, that will be a major victory for the international, for the what would you call it, the evil empire, Russia, China, Iran, etc. That is one of their main targets right now.
How would you say the Trump administration has approached countering anti-Semitism domestically and abroad?
Well, they're doing it with things like, they are sanctioning universities who allow anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish and anti-Israel feelings and protests on their soil, which is great, which is good. But the real source of this is Russia, Iran, China, Qatar, etc. And so the Trump administration is being tougher with Russia than it was, I must say, but it's still not very tough on China, and actually wants to do deals with Qatar, which is one of the main homes of the Muslim Brotherhood, and it is holding Israel back from finishing Hamas off. So I think the Trump administration's doing some things right here, but it's not getting to the root of the problem. The root of the anti-Semitic problem, which is seeping into the Republican Party, into the MAGA movement, into the evangelical churches of America, is allowing foreign propaganda to flood the internet completely unchecked. That is the real source of the problem, and that's not being addressed.
And just real quick, Trevor, do you think there is any way on the local level, the grassroots level, where communities can, sort of push back against this propaganda? What can regular people do?
Well, regular people can fly Israeli flags. Regular people can counter disinformation on the internet. Regular people can stand up courageously, because if you take a pro-Israel stand on the internet right now, you're going to get hammered. But realize this is bots. Realize this is indoctrinated people. And the American people are still largely on the side of Israel. So, we got to be brave and courageous. And that's the thing that is most lacking now. People get intimidated when they get hammered on the internet or hammered on Facebook for saying something truthful or questioning the propaganda narrative. And so I would support these initiatives. You could hold local rallies, like the Ukrainian people have held rallies in support of Ukraine. You can hold, the Jews should be out there right now holding pro-Israel rallies. Absolutely. But then the problem is, in certain cities, you'll get left-wingers attacking them and the local police will do nothing about it. So, but where you can, we should be very public about where we stand, standing up for what is right here. October 7th was a tragedy. As I said, it was Putin's birthday. Hamas was in Moscow a week before they did the attacks. We know that some of them were trained by Russians in northern Russia and possibly in Africa as well. So we need to understand this is not about anti-Semitism. This is about the global play of the evil empire versus the free West. And they're picking on Israel. They're picking on what they see as the weakest point right now. And we've got to stand against that. We have got to stand with our Western friends.
Okay, Trevor, well said. It's always great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton launches undercover operations to infiltrate what he calls leftist terror cells. The investigation follows multiple acts of political violence in recent months. We have that story and more after this break.
Is deep-sea fish oil really healthy? Due to pollution in the oceans, most fish contain heavy metal elements and radioactive substances. That's why it's so important to choose a pure source of omega-3. Puritan Green Vegetable Omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds, which are rich in nutrients and minerals. It effectively improves brain power and is beneficial to the heart's health. Puritan Green Vegetable Omega-3. Eat 2 a day and you'll feel brand new.
For 65 years, Mathis Home has been helping you create the room of your dreams at great values. Come celebrate with anniversary savings store-wide. Check out their amazing selection of upholstered beds. Here's a hot buy. This modern queen bed is covered in a soft, luxurious fabric. It's available in 2 colors for just $5.99. There's over 100 bedrooms in stock, so you're sure to find the style just right for you with fast, free delivery. Come celebrate with 65th anniversary savings at your furniture superstore, Mathis Home.
You are not hid.